December 4th, 2510. I sit in my new yet unstaffed laboratory, the racks of AI matrices and optical routers still sealed in their crates. My doubts have returned. Perhaps some reflection on my original motivations for coming here will help. It started 3 years ago when I met the acclaimed Dr. Carver, still the darling of the CMA, at one of those academic social mixers where everyone is charming and trying to impress project benefactors. Even as a doe-eyed doctoral candidate, I detested these affairs, so when I heard Carver describing the matrix mechanics of socio- and political economic vectors of human expansion, I couldn't resist correcting him. His ideas were genius, his algorithm implementation obsolete. I outlined a corrective matrix calculation, revising the dimensional parameters in my head. He used 7 when he needed 16. Carver, who had been coasting on the lecture circuit after his initial publication, didn't appreciate the truth, especially from a young upstart. The Vice Admiral, then a captain, however, took note. If I had known that Carver would commit suicide 2 years later, I may have been more charitable in my presentation. Carver blamed himself for the very carnage he had predicted. A lesson for all scientists resides therein. 3 weeks after that party, my grant proposal for artificial intelligence control for n-dimensional matrices was greenlit by the UNSC, contingent on the successful testing of a model of their choosing. Naturally, it was Carver's. I knew that his flawed model would produce flawed results. To avoid having this reflect poorly on my technique, I ran my correct 16-dimensional variant as a control in addition to his 7-dimensional version. Carver's model predicted a breakdown of social order in the outer colonies within 20 years unless strict governmental control was established, reinforced by an immediate and permanent military presence. The resultant vector was correct, but not the magnitude. I ran more than 1,400 simulations varying every parameter, and in the best case scenario the outer colonies would rebel, and rebel soon. With FTL capability transports, any colony could convert such vehicles into weapons of mass destruction. Minimum effect was 30 years of war and 5 billion dead. The maximum effect was unbounded. Interminable war, another dark age for humanity. I took my results to the Vice Admiral. But the UNSC already knew. They had come to a similar conclusion, a slightly gratifying tidbit given that it had taken them 3 years of intensive research. Then why make me do the same calculation? The Office of Naval Intelligence had apparently had their eye on me for years, and knew that the only way to convince me to join them was to get me to convince me. It worked. I joined. How many lives must be spent to save all of humanity? Is any price too high to pay? This may be our only solution. Now back to work. Need more dark coffee. Why can't they grow decent coffee on this planet?
She details right off the bat that she is in her new lab, which one would assume, based on the sketch of herself made in the previous entry, that it is the same lab that exists under the surface of Reach under Oni Sword Base, or somewhere in that same facility. No mention of the Forerunner artifact that we know to be there is made, so it perhaps hadn't even been discovered yet. She goes on to detail the meeting that she had with Dr. Carver, and how she corrected him upon first meeting him, demonstrating she not only had a superior intellect, but that Carver's ego didn't appreciate being made a show of in front of his benefactors. She references his suicide 2 years later, and makes note that he blamed himself for the carnage he predicted. 3 weeks after the meeting, her proposal that she outlined during that meeting to Carver and his benefactors was greenlit by the UNSC on the condition that she successfully tests Carver's 7-dimensional model. She knew her own model was the correct one, so she ran her calculations in parallel with his as a control, knowing that his flawed model would produce flawed results. Whatever she did, it evidently worked. Carver's model predicted that the insurrection and the rebel movements would escalate to complete social breakdown across the colonies within 20 years. He was right on what would happen, but wrong on the timescale, indicating that Halsey's own calculations were actually correct. And she did make 1,400 of those calculations, all with varying parameters, revealing that it would happen, but significantly sooner. The UNSC already knew this, as they had already done the calculations themselves, but it had taken them 3 years, whereby it evidently only took Halsey a few weeks. I find it odd that she seems to think that Carver killed himself due to his own predictions being a self-fulfilling prophecy and blaming himself, when in reality it seems more likely to me that he was trumped and humiliated in front of his benefactors and was promptly thereafter shown that his calculations really were wrong, and the UNSC and Halsey knew it, indicating what he predicted would happen but significantly sooner. Having this information made public would have discredited Carver, likely dissolving his career viability, and forced the realization that it was a no-win scenario for him from the start. Either everyone believed him, but the insurrection comes over a decade and a half sooner, revealing him to be inaccurate and the blame for the rebellion falling on him, or people finding out he was incorrect in the way that they did, and he is discredited and still in the firing line for the blame game. I'm somewhat surprised that Halsey didn't appear to notice that connection, and if she did, it evidently either didn't bother her, or it bothered her so much that she ignored it. In either case, all of this simply played out that Oni had been watching Halsey for a long time and wanted her on side and got her there in any way they could. She finishes by questioning how high the price for saving humanity should be. That should the ends really justify the means, or is every single life worth saving, even if doing so means more suffer in the long run? It's a difficult and complex moral dilemma, but I can't help but agree with her motivations. The ends really do justify the means. In order to save humanity from extinction, though she didn't realise that at the time, it most definitely was worth what she did. The results speak for themselves. I don't believe it really could have been handled in any other way.